Hi there, and a very warm welcome to Season 6, Episode 28 of People Soup. It's Ross McIntosh here.
So we think that, approaches such as acceptance and commitment therapy or ACT can be very helpful in supporting these processes because many people, including staff and individuals themselves, find it very hard to initiate these conversations. So thinking about using approaches like ACT that help you kind of recognize that discomfort, but also recognize why it's important to have these conversations and hones in on people's values, what's important to them, what they might like to do, even if they are not as mobile as they might be, or they're not able to travel as far as they would like, but they still want to connect with those important to them.
Pea Soupers, in this episode you'll get to meet Dr. Anne Finucane, who is a Marie Curie Senior Research Fellow at the University of Edinburgh. It's the first of a three-parter. Next week we'll meet one of Anne's colleagues, Dr. David Galanders, and then the week after I'll talk to both Anne and David about their brilliant website, mygriefmyway.co.uk. In this episode, we'll get to know a bit more about Anne. Anne shares her journey from studying international marketing to following her curiosity and shifting to psychology. She describes her pivotal moments, including when she discovered acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, and realised its potential applications. Anne talks about the importance of palliative care and its impact on the quality of life for many people. I had no idea that a large proportion of the deaths in the UK will involve some form of palliative care. She also talks about bereavement support and the integration of ACT in helping individuals cope with grief. Anne shares her knowledge and expertise in a gentle and highly informative way. I was so keen to have both Anne and David on the podcast, as palliative care and grief will undoubtedly touch so many people, if not all people, in the workplace, and the website is a brilliant resource. For those of you who are new to People Soup, welcome. It's great to have you here. We aim to provide you with the ingredients for a better work life, from behavioural science and beyond. For those of you who are regular Pea Soupers, thanks for tuning in again. We love it that you're part of our community. Let's scoot over to the news desk. Firstly, those with heightened noticing skills will have spotted there's been a mid-season break. This was a combination of work and life events, which gave rise to an unplanned breakette. I'd like to give a special shout out to Pea Super Catherine G and say thanks again for checking in and for your support. It's always such a boost to get a message from a listener, and I'm delighted to be back. In other news, the first cohort of my small group supervision programme for those applying ACT in the workplace has concluded with very positive feedback. There will be more cohorts after summer, and I'm in the planning stage at the moment. So let's crack on. For now, get a brew on and have a listen to my chat with Anne Finucane. Anne Finucane and David Galanders, welcome to People Soup.
Thank you.
Hi Ross, great to be here.
Well, I'm delighted to have you both here. We're going to find out a bit more about you both to begin with, but then I'm going to move on to your brilliant project, mygriefmyway.co.uk. And Anne, I'm going to start with you, if that's all right. I've got a little research department here, and they've found out brief details about you. So if it's all right, I'll share them, and then I'll invite you to expand on that. So it says here, Dr. Anne Finucane is a Marie Curie Senior Research Fellow in Clinical Psychology at the University of Edinburgh. Her research focuses on mental health and well-being for people impacted by serious, life-limiting illness. Anne is the joint leader with David on a research programme that focuses on palliative and end-of-life care, bereavement and well-being. Now, Anne, there's one other bit of information my research department found out, and it's a bit sketchier. But they say you're a keen tango dancing enthusiast, and rumour has it that you're actually going to be doing a demo dance on Strictly this year. I don't know if you can comment on that at all, Anne.
No comment on that, Ross. I'm going to keep that one under wraps.
Oh my God, I can't wait to see the outfit, Anne. So, Anne, I've presented a brief insights from my research department, but I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about your career to date and how you've got to where you've got to, maybe with some pivotal moments along the way.
Yeah, well, thanks, Ross. So, I actually originally started studying international marketing and languages many years ago in the early 90s, but I quite quickly discovered that marketing wasn't really my passion and that actually it was psychology, which what I was truly interested in. So I then took up a degree with Open University in my spare time, and then during that period I realised this is really my calling, and I need to find a way of kind of shifting my career into psychology. So I'd met my future husband at that time, and he was from Scotland. So we both decided in the early 2000s to return to university as mature students. So I moved over to Edinburgh and I undertook a master's and then a PhD in psychology. And so I really enjoyed that. And by the end of my studies, then I had an opportunity to take up a teaching fellow role, a temporary role, which gave me an opportunity to continue some research and also get some experience of teaching in the Department of Psychology at Edinburgh. However, as a normal life goes on at the same time, and I was soon on maternity leave, so I was off for a year. So then I kind of had this period of out with the academia, and then when I was ready to come back, I had to start again looking for roles as a postdoctoral fellow or a lecturer. And I also wanted to stay around Edinburgh, as that where my home was based. So during this search period, I found a advert for a research lead at our local hospice, so Marie Curie Hospice in Edinburgh. And so this appealed to me. My sister is a palliative care nurse in Ireland, so I had a good sense of the work that was involved in palliative care from her. And I also liked the idea of applying psychology and looking at like applying some theories and evidence to improve the development of interventions and to improve the care of people who were particularly in need and people who were going through a distressing time. So I applied for that job. I wasn't shortlisted initially, partly because I didn't have any palliative care experience, but as it turned out, I was the person that got the job, and it worked out really well. I loved working at Marie Curie Hospice. I really enjoyed the aspect of working with a multidisciplinary team, so engaging with doctors, nurses, allied healthcare professionals, and also working with people whose main focus was on caring for a seriously ill person and their families. So it always kind of made the work really tangible for us, what we needed to do. And I also thought that there was a role for research and evidence in this setting. And Marie Curie is a national charity in the UK. It provides hospice based support and palliative care services in the community to people across the UK. And it also has a bereavement support service that's predominantly delivered through the hospices or online. But there was also a good deal of need for evidence and
Mm.
evaluation and research to explore how to further develop these services so that more people who are approaching end of life or who have been bereaved can get the care they need. So in 2021, the funding model changed a little, and I joined the Department of Clinical Psychology with David. So still funded by Marie Curie through a 5 year fellowship. So David and I started working very closely together then. Now, what I forgot to say, which was really pivotal, was in 2014 I attended a conference where I was presenting some of our regular
Mm.
research, and I happened upon a talk that was being delivered by David Galanders and Ray Owen on something called acceptance and commitment therapy. And so this seminar was a little bit kind of off the beaten track. There was a few
Mm.
corridors that you had to go down to find the room, and eventually I got there. And when I got there, I saw the place was totally full. And David was describing acceptance and commitment therapy, and with Ray, they were describing how this could be and have lots of potential for use in palliative care. So that really struck me as my first introduction to ACT as something that could be incredibly useful for people who are dealing with deteriorating health and the distress that comes with a terminal illness. So for me, that was a pivotal moment in terms of then inviting David out to the hospice and having the great opportunity of working with David on a number of projects and other collaborators like Professor Nick Hulbert Williams in Chester and Dr. Brooks Swash in Chester. Nick actually is now at Edge Hill University. But
Mm.
so that was also a pivotal moment. But then from my fellowship role back at Edinburgh University, David and I have worked together to develop a programme of work using ACT for bereavement and just looking at its potential in palliative care. And that has been a really exciting program of work that we're continuing to develop through My Grief My Way and also other projects.
Anne, thank you so much for sharing a bit about your background. I wonder if I could ask a couple of questions. You said you started out in marketing and international something. I've forgotten what the something is.
International marketing and languages, French and Spanish.
Blimey. And so what hooked you about psychology? What was the interest? What made you do that pivot at that point?
Well, I had always been interested in psychology, and I read kind of popular psychology books. I think the first book I read, maybe when I was around 16 or 17, was Dorothy Rowe, talking about internalizing and externalizing behaviors. And I was always really interested in what caused people's behaviors, what motivated people, and just to understand a little bit more around why people made certain decisions, and also then to think, well, how could you change certain behaviors if people are behaving in ways that aren't really helpful towards them? What kind of guidance is there in the world about understanding this and then kind of improving things? So I really was always really interested in that, but actually I didn't really know what psychology was when I was 16 or 17. We didn't really have a psychology course or training at high school level in Ireland. And my dad worked in marketing and said, this is very a glamorous job, international marketing, you can travel and it's the new thing, we've moved from sales to marketing and it's very creative. So I thought, oh, that sounds good, Dad. So off I went, and in my first year I thought, oh no, I wanted to do I wanted to understand people's behavior, because then I realized I had a better understanding. Then you could actually do a degree in psychology. So I think that was it. It was just the understanding others and understanding others, so then you could start to understand, well, what can you do to kind of help improve things where people are having difficulties or getting stuck with something in their lives.
Thank you. Anne, when I was checking you out on LinkedIn, I saw that fairly recently you've been a co-author on a paper looking at the demands on the palliative care services in the UK. And what struck me was I can't remember the exact percentages, but I think it was around, if I've got this right, the minimum was around 70% of deaths require some form of palliative care and support in the UK, and it can go as high as, I think, around 90. Now, I might have got those figures wrong, but I think my point, my reflection was, crikey, I didn't think it was that high.
Yeah, so that's true, Ross. And I think, like palliative care is an approach that improves quality of life for people with an incurable illness, and supports symptoms, physical, social, psychological, or spiritual. And in society today, the vast majority of people who die in the UK die from a advanced progressive illness. As opposed to in centuries gone by, people would have died from infectious diseases, an abscess as a result of that causes an infection as a result of a toothache, from accidents and so on. But this has now shifted. So for most people, and people will die from, there's three really typical trajectories. So cancer, a form of organ failure such as heart disease, or neurological illness, or frailty and dementia. So these are all illnesses that can be identified in advance, so people can start to avail of palliative care should they need that. That doesn't necessarily mean palliative care is provided by hospice settings, but it could be, and for most people it would be, a palliative care approach provided by healthcare and social care professionals in the community or in hospital settings. And that might involve, for instance, having discussions with people about what's important to you now, in this phase of your life, and what would you like, in the future as your health deteriorates. And this is important for people with, cancer, who might experience a sudden decline, or for people with a type of heart failure or kidney disease whereby it mightn't be so clear to them, the point at which they will deteriorate significantly. Some of these individuals might have admission to hospital. During that admission, they might get good care and return home, or it might be determined that they might need to move to a care home or some sort of supported accommodation, or it might be that they might end up dying in hospital. So a census conducted by Professor David Clark in 2013 found that of people in hospital at any point in time, about 10% of people die in that setting, and about nearly 30% of people in hospital at any point in time will die within that following 12-month period. So there's a lot of very ill people in hospital, and in hospital they could start those conversations around advanced care planning, around what would I do if my health deteriorated, if I wasn't able to cope on my own. And all of those conversations are part of palliative care and part of thinking ahead with the intention of supporting people to have good quality of life, even if their physical health is deteriorating and their time is limiting. So we think that approaches such as acceptance and commitment therapy or ACT can be very helpful in supporting these processes, because many people, including staff and individuals themselves, find it very hard to initiate these conversations. So thinking about using approaches like ACT that help you kind of recognize that discomfort, but also recognize why it's important to have these conversations, and hones in on people's values, what's important to them, what they might like to do, even if they are not as mobile as they might be, or they're not able to travel as far as they would like, but they still want to connect with those important to them. So that's why we think that approaches like ACT is very helpful, and for the vast majority of people. Really, and I think there are different ways to measure the number of people that could benefit from palliative care. So as you say, the research provides a range depending on how you assess it. Some assessments at population level will just link palliative care with certain diagnoses and suggest if you have this diagnosis, it's likely you would benefit from a palliative care approach. Other really broad brush methods might say, well, if you remove any, accidents or sudden deaths, then what are the proportion of people that die during a given year? And in the UK, it's about 750,000 people a year. Then in relation to bereavement, there are statistics that suggest for every person who dies, about 5 people will be bereaved. There's other higher measures such as 9 people, but even if you go at the more conservative assessment, that would suggest about 3.5 million people are bereaved in the UK every year. That's quite a lot of people who are bereaved and who need to avail of some form of bereavement support. Then thinking about bereavement support, you can think, well, what kind of support do people need? And then we know that the vast majority of people will do well with support from family and friends. We know grieving is a natural process, and for most people, people adapt over time. And much of the evidence suggests that whereas about 60% of people do well with support from family and friends, about 30% of people could benefit with some additional support. So this might be some volunteer-led support, or from other forms of group support or peer support available to them in the community, or through their local church or support systems. And then about 10% of people are at risk of more prolonged complex grief and would really benefit from additional specialist-led support, such as that provided by a psychologist or a skilled counsellor or mental health specialist. So, death comes to everyone, 100% of people. For a large proportion of people, it will be from a chronic long-term illness, and there are things that palliative care offers that can really ensure that despite that you have a good quality of life, and help then prepare people for the loss and support people during bereavement.
Gosh, it's absolutely fascinating hearing you talk, and so interesting. It's not something we always talk about that much. And this is why I was so keen to get you both on the podcast, because obviously grief touches people in the workplace.
Yeah.
Grief can impact on people quite significantly in the workplace, but also people in the workplace die, and their colleagues will experience some form of grief. Now, you talked about when you went down those corridors and you ended up in a room with the legends that are Owen and Galanders, and what a treat. And I wonder, Anne, have you found an impact of applying ACT in your own life at all?
I do try to apply ACT in my own life, and I guess it's been really helpful in particularly helping me focus on values and what's important. And I think especially it's quite tricky juggling different values as well, and trying to focus on values at specific time points. So I found that really helpful in terms of helping me to make decisions about what I want to do at a particular point in time. To be honest, I would like to do some more mindfulness exercises more regularly than I actually do. So this is I'm noticing that I'm actually coming back to that, and that would be quite helpful for me. But it's been really helpful in terms of, I suppose, helping me kind of notice how I respond to situations. Like as I mentioned, like I'm not so comfortable at podcasts and this type of experience, but I can recognize my anxiety in relation to that, and I can recognize as well that it's a really good opportunity, and it's important for me to engage in this to kind of help share the work that we're doing. So I find that can be very useful for me in lots of things in everyday life. But I would
Oh,
like to do more kind of engage more experientially in the mindfulness aspects. So I'm
yeah.
noticing that I'm saying that now.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you for being so open. I think there are elements of the model, those of us who are in the world of applying ACT, that we can all do with some reflection and noticing on. Couple more questions, Anne. Thinking about your career to date, what advice would you have for your younger self at school? What would you say to Anne at school?
So I probably would say follow your passion. Work out what it is that you love and follow it. And I think when I was at school, I was probably a little bit too quick to do what I was told was probably a good option, probably quite practical option. Probably understandable that it was coming out of the 80s, which was quite a difficult period in Ireland and economically. So it was very important that you find something that was quite that you could get a good permanent job in. I did sneak in when I was going to universities. I did sneak into the talks about communications and media, which was clear that was a very transient job, and you'd be going from contract to contract. So I wasn't really encouraged to kind of follow that route either. So, but I think then I soon realised actually where my passion lay, and it was a little bit later. So had I kind of worked out how to and had the confidence to follow that earlier on, then I probably would have come into this area a bit sooner rather than later, although all my experiences along the way have been really helpful and kind of shaped what I do now and the way I work now. But I think follow your passion would be my main advice to myself back then.
Thank you, Anne. And a final question from me for now is your song choice.
Oh yes.
Imagine you had a song that would announce your arrival in the room, not forever, but for the next 2 or 3 months. And this would announce you when you come home, when you walk into the supermarket, when you arrive in a meeting with David. This song would play. Have you any thoughts on what it would be and why?
So I did have a think about this, and the song I think I'd like to hear over the next few weeks, the next little while, is "High Hopes" by Panic at the Disco. So I don't know if you know that one, but it goes something like, I'm not going to sing it, Ross, but it's had to have high, high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars when I couldn't make a living. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. So that's my song. I know where I think would be really good to get to, and what would be helpful. Not always sure how to get there or how to do it, but I have high hopes that things will work out. And I think that's usually how I kind of come into a room, come into a space, and I'm going on my holidays soon, so I'm going to have high hopes for the holidays. Haven't done much planning yet, but I'm sure it will all work out and we'll have a great time. So that's my song choice.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Anne. And thank you for making space to sit with the bit of the discomfort for coming on the show. I'm so pleased you're here. And I'm going to give you a breather now, because I'm going to move on to our David. That's it, folks. My chat with Anne in the bag. Next week, I'll be talking to Anne's colleague, Dr. David Galanders, from the University of Edinburgh. You'll find the show notes for this episode at peoplesoup.captivate.fm or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like this episode, we'd love it if you told us why. You can email at peoplesoup.pod@gmail.com. On the socials, I'm still posting on Instagram at people.soup, and I'm on LinkedIn too, as well as a new account on Blue Sky. Just search for my name. Now more than ever, you can help me reach more people with the special People Soup ingredients, stuff that could be really useful for them. So please do share, subscribe, rate and review. Thanks to Andy Glenn for his spoon magic and Alex Engelberg for his vocals. But most of all, dear listener, thanks to you. Look after yourselves, pea soupers, and bye for now.
No comment on that, Ross. I'm going to keep that one under wraps.
Oh my God, I can't wait to see the outfit, Anne.